Thank you guys for joining us this evening. My name is Kelly O'Mullen. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Dyslexia Center of Austin, and we're really excited to have Tara Cevallos be presenting about the understanding or get a presentation on understanding the Texas Education Freedom Accounts. This is a new initiative that I think both parents as well as educators and interventionists, we need to know more about as it unfolds throughout Texas. So just a quick little bit, if you're new to the Dyslexia Center of Austin, I want to tell you a little bit about us before we start. We are a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2014 with the goal and mission of helping children with dyslexia thrive. And we kind of have four primary missions. The primary one, Tara, if you want to just go to the second, you're good, just go to the second. We have four main components to our mission. The first one is providing exceptional dyslexia therapy and training, as well as other trainings and workshops for educators and parents. We also provide comprehensive dyslexia evaluations or educational evaluations for dyslexia and other learning differences for parents at a reduced cost. We've got to find the kids before we can help them. And the third component is we provide free summer dyslexia therapy in partnership with another nonprofit in Austin during that summer month, those summer months, to help bridge the gap. So, and finally, it's the dyslexia awareness piece. And this is for both educators, parents. We want to be that resource throughout Texas. And that's part of this workshop that we're bringing to you today. Quick introductions to Tara Cevallos. Not only is she a longtime friend and colleague, but she is co-founder with me with the Dyslexia Center of Austin and a qualified instructor. She, for the last 8 years, I believe, maybe 9, is the principal at St. Austin Catholic School. She is also a member of the Texas Governor's CAC committee, the Continuing Advisory Committee on Special Education. So I love talking with her and getting all this knowledge and sharing what we're experiencing in the field to get it to the ear of the governor. So I will hand it off to Tara and enjoy. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Kelly. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see you all tonight. I don't get to see many of our colleagues as I'd like to, but it's nice to see many of y'all's faces tonight. So again, as Kelly mentioned, I'm currently in my 9th year as principal at St. Austin Catholic School. And so as you can imagine, as a private school, especially as Catholic schools, it has been a very big initiative for Catholic educators in the state of Texas to really understand and embrace what now we are calling the Texas Education Freedom Account, which was before was called SB2, parental choice, school choice. It's kind of been called a bunch of things. So tonight we're going to talk about what it is and what it's not, recognize how it will work as we understand it today. I believe it's December 5th. So things change quickly when it comes to governmental agencies. And of course, who would be eligible. We'll talk to you about online resources that you all can access and stay abreast of the unfolding information and how you can apply both as families, but also as educators. So I recognize tonight that I'm talking to parents whose children are enrolled either in a public school who are looking for a school that's a better fit for them, which would be a private school, or current private school families who would like to take part of the full benefits of TEFA. And then also educators, CALTs or approved, who can apply to become approved vendors through and for the Texas Education Freedom Account. All right, so what is TEFA? So it is essentially an education savings account. Think about it just like your HSA account. For those of you with health insurance that you have an HSA, it's a pot of money that gets distributed or dispersed into your HSA bank, and then you get to choose how you want to spend that money. And if you don't spend that money, as we know with HSA accounts, it does accumulate and or roll over. So the account will be through Odyssey. I'm skipping down a little bit. And so that is our Certified Education Assistance Organization. SB2 became law in September 1st, on September 1st, and it provides approximately $1 billion for this first year, which they're estimating could potentially be give money to potentially 70,000 students within the state of Texas. That is all going to vary upon which prioritizations goes first. They are predicting that prioritization number 1, which we'll get to in a second, and prioritization number 3 are going to be the 2 bigger ones, which are for the poor and the vulnerable, or for the low socioeconomic and those with learning differences, special needs. And so it may be less than 70,000, depending upon those two. It will launch, so that means the funds will be available for parents to be utilizing for the 26-27 school year. The governmental agency in the state of Texas that is overseeing this is our Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts. And the funds will be available to eligible students who are accepted into the program. So depending upon eligibility, is how much money those students would get. Initially, when the bill was going through, which I've been involved in school choice, parental choice, TEFA for the past 10 years, and it's changed. But initially, when that bill was agreed upon, it was going to be around 10,500. And then, as many of you know, there was a parent bill, which was also giving money and additional funding to the public schools, which is great. All education needs to be funded in additional funding. So that bill got passed in tandem. They called it the Texas two-step with the school choice bill. So now there's additional funding going to public schools, which then provides additional funding for the TEFA. So they are estimating that it's going to be closer to $12,000 at minimum per student for TEFA. Now, if you are an eligible student, which most of us probably on this call would have a student, or you would be a provider that would be serving a student who would be a student with a disability. I know a lot of us don't like to use that word, especially myself, but learning difference, dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD that is categorized by the public school system as OHI. All of our 13 categories of special education in the state of Texas, in the United States, they could get up to $30,000. And it's going to depend upon what TEA allocates to that eligible disability as to how much they get. But it should be somewhere between that $12,000 and that $30,000 for someone that's going into a private school. If they are a homeschool student, they will get the maximum of $2,000. And what can they utilize that money for? They'll be able to utilize it for tuition and fees at an accredited private school. They'll be eligible to utilize it if they're in high school and they're getting some dual language courses, or if they're in a private school and they're needing to do some, credit recovery or other kind of remedial, any kind of educational online programs, they would be able to utilize that for. And then any program that's providing educational resources that are approved by TEA, they would be able to utilize that money for that. Additionally, textbooks, lunch programs, breakfast programs, uniforms, if there's any kind of bus transportation that the private schools would occur, any kind of technology, computer, hardware, software, other devices, those, just like many things in federal funding, would technically need to be sent back at the end of, if the parent unenrolled, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but any kind of academic assessments, And then this is where it gets into, for our dyslexia students, any kind of private tutoring, teaching services, or educational therapies or services. All of that would be included as an eligible expense. Looking at who's going to be eligible and prioritized in this bill. So the eligibility is based on a student who's for kindergarten through 12th grade. They have to be U.S. citizens and lawful residents and that are able to attend public schools. There is some, and this may not be relevant in this population, but I do just want to say it, given, you know, my Catholic faith and our care for the poor and vulnerable, we do want to make sure and note that if there are families who do have mixed status, there is some further maybe thought and or care that those families need to go through as they think about applying for this federal money, if they're mixed status. But this right now, it's as long as the student is a U.S. citizen and is a lawful resident who can attend a public school, that child should receive the money. The prioritization, which we'll look at here in a second, should be those for prioritization number 1 is special learning needs less than 500,000 of federal poverty, which we'll talk about. And then prioritization number 2 and 3 are those of low income. If a child, if a student is in prioritization 1 and 2, then their siblings would then be approved together. Those families need to apply for all siblings. So if there's a child that has dyslexia, but yet the other ones do not, the family needs to apply. Let's say it's a family of 3. They need to apply for all 3. If the student who qualifies under prioritization number 1 gets approved, the other ones will also get approved with them. A lot of this bill has a lot of the Catholic faith kind of infused upon it, because the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops was integral in getting this bill passed. And because, you know, Catholics, they have a very large families and they want to keep families together. That was a huge part of it. So again, if it is only one sibling that has dyslexia, apply for all siblings and they would be approved together. And then the other great thing is that families don't have to reapply year over year. And then lastly, and this one is for us to all kind of experience as the time goes through this bill, is families, because it's an HSA or something like an HSA, they don't have to use the funds each year. They will roll over. The limit is that they will expire once the child hits 12th grade. So they do need to spend it before the child graduates from high school, but they could save it as they're thinking about private education, and that it does increase in cost as the years go on. Looking at pre-K eligibility is just a little bit different. Those students have to be able to be in a state of Texas. Not every child is eligible for free pre-K. And so the same thing goes for the eligibility for SB2 for pre-K students, is those have to be the students who would qualify for free public pre-K, which generally are our English language learners, children in foster care, military families, or those with very low socioeconomic status. So let's talk a little bit about the prioritization. So there are 4 levels of prioritization. The prioritization number 1 are those with children that have a special education qualifying disability whose family's income is equal to or less than 500% of the federal poverty. So that is a both and. Special education learning difference and their income is less than 500%. That's prioritization number 1. Prioritization number 2 will be families with income less than 200,000. We'll look at that in a second. And then prioritization number 3 is families with income between 200 and 500% of the federal poverty guidelines. And then everybody else is prioritization number 4. And the only difference in prioritization number 4 is that only 20% of those students, it's actually the other way around. Only 20% of those students, 20% of that funding can go to funding for those coming from private schools. All right. So each category, each of those 4 categories will have a lottery. And that's where we go back to that first slide where we talked about 70,000 students could potentially benefit from this $1 billion, is we just don't know how many students in each category are going to apply. There's been a huge marketing effort from, I know, our Catholic schools in getting the word out to our parishes and Catholic schools, and just anybody who's listening across the state to increase enrollment there. And that would be a lot of kids with learning differences, but also of the prioritization number 3, where it's the 200 to 500% federal poverty. So that's where they're really thinking that's where the most of the monies go. So if we look at, let's just take a family of 4, and we consider prioritization number 1, where we've got a child in that home whose child has a diagnosis of dyslexia. That family would need to make less than $160,750 to be able to qualify for prioritization number 1. And then you can see, depending upon the other, how many students how many children, how many members are in your household, so on and so forth. So for prioritization number 3, they'd need to make, without having a dyslexia or any kind of learning difference, they'd need to make between 64 and 160,000 to qualify for that prioritization. Let's talk now about who the state is going to accept for prioritization number 1. So first and foremost, this is a child with a disability who is not more than 21 years old that has some sort of visual or auditory impairments that prevents that student or that adult child from being educated in a public school. Or it's a child between 3 and 21 who has a qualifying disability in those 13 areas. And even though you're only seeing 7 on the screen right now, many of them break up into different areas. So these are kind of the overarching areas that we know, and the predominant ones being specific learning disability, autism, speech and language, and OHI. So OHI will qualify on here, and ADHD will qualify if it has an OHI diagnosis, or if they have a qualification through the public school system as OHI. But let's talk about that a little bit, because this is where it gets a little kind of hairy. So the law is saying right now that they need an IEP in order to qualify for the maximum amount of funding, meaning the $30,000, which will still depend upon TEA's analysis of that learning difference and how much money they would be normally getting from the state in the public school system. They would need an IEP to get that maximum funding. However, once the new rules came out right before Thanksgiving on November 25th, they are going to allow for prioritization number 1 to have a private evaluation by an approved doctor. And it's not just a psychologist or a medical doctor. It could be, they did extend that to listing diagnostician or LSSP, or in the instance of speech and language, it would be an SLP, whoever is that qualifying, approved by the state to qualify or approved by their certifying body to qualify a child with those disabilities. They also could qualify for prioritization number one. However, they would not qualify to get the maximum amount of funding by TEA. So therefore, they would get that lower amount, which has yet to be solidified, whether it's going to be around that 10,500 or potentially up to the 14,000. I'm going to let that kind of sit for just a minute. We're almost done with the presentation, and we'll definitely go into questions then. But that's a big kind of nuanced thing. The IEP does not have to be current, quote and unquote. It just needs to be an IEP. Right now, as we understand it from Odyssey, they're going to be able to access IRS records electronically. Parents are going to have to upload information. Additionally, they're going to be able to access TEA records. Parents aren't going to have to upload IEPs. So as long as they have an IEP in the system, they should be good to qualify for prioritization number one and maximum funding. If the parent only has a diagnosis through a psychologist for ADHD, let's take that as instance, they would then have to probably upload that into Odyssey and then wait for Odyssey to approve that. What we've been recommending for the past few months, as we knew this was coming down, is that parents request through Child Finds to get their child a full and individual, an FIIE through the public school system, and then get their IEP. We're a little bit pretty tight. I don't think that the timeline would work out for that 45 days window for them to get an IEP. I still would, tomorrow be telling those parents to do it, but they might miss that window to get the evaluation and then the subsequent IEP. There has been some language that I've seen. I just haven't heard the official word as long as they're in the system, would they then get to be able to get that prioritization number one. So that is still unforeseen. It now is due by that February, I believe it's February 4th. We're going to get to the dates here in a second. It's February 4th is when when it opens. They just need to have their IEP in the system by the time it closes, because since it's a lottery, it's not first come, first serve. It's when the window closes, then the pool of lottery happens. So I would still be recommending to any of your clients, or if you are a parent who does not have an FIIE, go through, ask your school tomorrow, get in the system. The schools are incentivized, districts are incentivized to fast track all of these evaluations monetarily through another bill. They're getting paid additional money to do all of the testing right now. And as a private school, and those parents in our school who have gone through and recommended it, they've been extremely responsive in AISD, which has not always been the case, but they have been extremely responsive this year. So I would highly recommend that. So who are the approved schools that this money can be utilized for tuition and additional fees? As we talked about, it's either these families utilize it for a private school, or if they're homeschooling, they only get that $2,000. They have to be either accredited through TEPSAC or TEA. And all Catholic schools are accredited through TEPSAC. And some of the independents probably are. I can't speak to them, but you would just have to ask, are you an accredited school? And when a parent applies through Odyssey, there will be a drop down of those schools who are approved to receive this money. The money will be annually administered to schools who will be given to schools who administer a norm reference test in grades 3 through 12, because that's mirroring what's going on in the public school system. Those schools have to have been, or those districts or dioceses have to have been in operation for at least 2 school years. This is preventing any kind of those pop-up schools where people see, oh, look, we can start a new school and get maximum benefits of the $30,000 per student to start our own school. That is why this is one of those rules that are in there. And then all of us who are approved private schools would have to go through either a financial review or audit for our accreditation guidelines. This is the part that we'll talk about in terms of becoming a vendor. So as a certified academic language therapist or an SLP or any BCBA or RBT, anyone else who would be able to receive money as a vendor, that can include our lunch program, our caterers, our uniform companies, our school supply companies, anyone like that. So in order to become an approved vendor and provider, you will need to be either a qualified private tutorist, therapist, or teaching service individual and have that nationally recognized post-secondary education. So the CEAO, Odyssey, will have those guidelines, what they need vendors to upload into the system to prove that you are a certified body to provide these education services to these students. All of us, private schools and or vendors, when you're not going to receive the money from the government, right? From Texas state, the money is coming from the parents. Therefore, that means that you are not a recipient of federal financial assistance, and therefore you're not considered a state actor. And that means that the state can't impose any kind of limits or requirements on you for any kind of religious or institutional reasons. So really your autonomy is protected. So what are those next steps going to be? So if we're thinking about families, the parents, the students, really just gathering your child's records, transcripts, attendance records, things like that. And then the district and TA is going to have to verify that your child is eligible to participate in that program. And then you have to really adhere to all this TEFA and or the Odyssey, which is the CEAO confidentiality laws and timelines. So parents are going to have to agree if they receive this money, they'll have to agree to only spend the money on the eligible expenses, which we've gone over. They'll have to agree that their school will share their child's assessment results with Odyssey to verify that the private schools are, in fact, assessing their child's progress. So we, as the private schools, would then upload that into the system. And so you just have to authorize that the school that you choose for your child to go to would do that. Again, as I mentioned before, not sell any of the items that you purchase with program money, so computers, uniforms, things like that. And if you enroll your child in a private school and something goes wrong, and you choose to take your child back to the public school, you'd have to advise Odyssey within 30 days. Or your child graduating from high school or otherwise becoming ineligible, you have to just let them know. So those are really the only things that the parents have to agree to in order to receive that money. And you'll agree to that when you fill out your child's application. Right now, as of today, which I think some of this stuff is a little bit of a moving target, the application portal for for families, for students, is set to open on February 4th. They're going to let that application be open for a little more than a month. And because spring break is within that, I think that's why it's extended a little bit longer. I think there's still some not flexibility. There's still some skepticism as when they're going to notify families and schools of the acceptance. But right now, the information is saying that they'll notify as of May 1st about your acceptance into the program. I understand that the application is going to take a family about 10 to 15 minutes to fill out. I know a lot of the Catholic schools, possibly other private schools, are going to be hosting sessions where if families want to come and fill out applications there around that February 4th timeline. Again, it's not first come, first serve, so you don't have to be there on February 4th. But they'll be hosting some sessions in case you have any questions and or concerns or just want some help. So look out for some of the advertisements from maybe some of the private schools that you're interested in applying to. So they'll let you know once you finish filling out that application, which prioritization your child qualifies for. So they'll let you know if you're qualifying for prioritization number 1 or prioritization number 2 or prioritization number 3 or 4. That's somewhat immediate. But in terms of did you get the lottery, did you get the money, that is what that notification date of May 1st would be. We highly advise you to sign up for either the parent, student, and or vendor email updates from Texas Comptroller. As things change and evolve, they'll send you those updates. And this is the slide where we're talking about for vendors, for service providers, for CALTs, speech paths, as I mentioned, all the other vendors that could become applicable. That application portal is, and also for private schools, is set to open next week. As a private school, and it's Thursday, December 5th, I haven't received any information about how to do that. So I say that only because I'm just a little hesitant if that is actually going to come to fruition on the 9th. It might potentially get moved back. But I would say for vendors who are on this call, please go on to the Texas Comptrollers and sign up to be a vendor to get those email notifications. And that's where you'll get that notification that the application is open. All right. I think that completes everything in terms of the presentation, but I'm going to open up now for questions. And Kelly, I don't know if we put any in the chat or how you want to, if you want them just to add them to the chat.
No questions in the chat, so I think everybody was holding until the end. But feel free to jump in if you have any questions, but also know I'm going to make a PDF of this PowerPoint presentation and email it to everyone so you'll have it, a copy. And there are the links they're embedded in the PDF to sign up for the notifications, both from a parent perspective as well as an educator service provider. And we'll also have this video uploaded to our website blog. So if you've got any friends or if you want to refer back to it later, we'll have it on the website. But any questions for Tara? Thank you. Thank you this was all good information.
Sure. I know there's got to be some questions out there. I have questions. So it could be you don't know what you don't know yet. Are there any families out there that have any questions specifically?
Tara, do you want to stop there and we'll not let them know if we can see more faces?
All right, let me figure that out.
So we're up at the top.
Stop sharing.
There we go. One question in the chat: if only one of your children is school age, will your other children receive funds when they become of age?
Yes.
Okay, that was a good question. And so Odyssey, just for my clarification, Odyssey will be the vendor that organizes all of the applications and is
And
the
distributes
conduit.
the funds.
Okay.
They're your HSA, like partner, right? So they're the ones who are going to be depositing. So basically, as we understand it, think of it as an Amazon wish list. And every vendor, public, private school, dyslexia therapist, speech pathologist, everyone who goes in there and is an approved vendor will be like a drop-down menu. And parents will get to choose who they want to spend what money with. And so that's who Odyssey is they're the ones who will be like your Amazon.
Let's see. There's a request to go back to the vendor requirements pertaining. Most likely, I'm assuming it will be your CALT certification,
Mm-hmm.
or your license as a licensed dyslexia therapist. If
Exactly.
all of those nationally or state credentialing would probably be. I mean, we're guessing at this point. I'm assuming that's what they're looking for.
Absolutely. I do think that as we're seeing what's evolving in the Department of Education, everything moving under DSHS, so we think that that's really gonna help us a little bit where those are really where our licensures are housed underneath in the state of Texas anyways. And so that should be a pretty easy qualification. Just make sure you're up to date. Let's see.
Okay.
Once you said you're similar to HSA, once qualify, students will continue to qualify until graduation. Yes. Will they need further evaluation or IEPs after the student qualifies? Not as the law is written today. I have not seen that at all. One thing I do want to say that we are really encouraging is right now, this is $1 billion. This is the largest initial school choice bill in the history of the United States. There are two other states, Florida and Arizona, that have moved to universal choice. There is speculation that if this bill does well, in what that means does well is that there is good traction, there's good enrollment, people want this bill, that is what increases funding. And then the hope is that that would move to a universal choice for the entire state of Texas, not just for special needs. And so we want to encourage the participation in this bill. And it just really depends on your city and your area of what private schools are going to accept this bill. So which schools are choosing to go into utilize TEFA funding. And then again, I mean, as private schools, the acceptance is still based on their qualifications and their ability to have those resources to meet those needs. And what we're doing on the private school sector is trying to equip our schools to handle more students with special needs. And we know that the predominant need is those in the SLD category, followed up by speech and language, autism, and OHI. But that also means we need additional funding, which is where this up to $30,000 could potentially allow more schools to accept these students.
A few more questions in the chat. So on setting rates, I'm assuming that's by the individual provider.
So is that a CLT that's asking, is that Melinda
Yes.
as a therapist?
Yeah.
Okay. So no, Melinda, you set your rate. So I set my rate at St. Austin's. You set your rate as a private therapist. They're not going to dictate. This is not like whatever the district is paying is what you're going to get paid under title funding. So you set your rate. Absolutely. Let's see. If your child is too young to be tested for dyslexia, but are able to get tested and diagnosed in the future, will the amount of the funds change? So that was something that was pushed for. So the rules initially came out in September, and then there was this period for public comment. And then that's what got published on November 25th, is that revised. And as I understand it, in those revised rules, yes, the child then could reapply once they do get the assessment and get diagnosed. Because you said, but are able to get tested and diagnosed, the future, will their amount of funds change? Yes. So for instance, if a family is in first or second grade and they have yet to be identified with dyslexia, but they qualify based on prioritization number 2 or 3, meaning lower socioeconomic status, and then they get diagnosed maybe in 3rd grade with dyslexia, they would then be able to apply to get that additional funding. And then private testing, no, the funding will not be able to pay for private testing. And really, to get that maximum amount, that $30,000, you'll need to go through the public school system. And as a parentally private placed student, you can still get your child assessed through the public school, even though you've enrolled them in a private school. That's called child find. It's a national law, IDEA, and schools will be able to help you, and DCA would be able to help you navigate that if you have any questions. You mentioned private schools will need to submit assessment results. Will there be similar requirements for therapists? No, it's just for norm reference assessments for the schools, private schools. How often will the application window open for each school? I believe it's only going to be open once a year. So around that January, February timeline to be assessed for that next school year. Good questions. So for private schools to serve the students with additional funding, are there specific requirements programming certified providers? No. Really, it's the private schools acceptance of the child then gives the parents the opportunity to use their money, their TEFA funds, to pay the tuition for that school, right? So let's say that school's tuition is $10,000, but I know at St. Austin's we charge additional fees, ancillary fees for dyslexia remediation, for dysgraphia, for executive functioning, for accommodations. So those additional fees would be on top of tuition. And we charge that, and we have charged that for families in the past, and charge that for everybody. So there are no other requirements for private schools to serve the students. No other requirements. Nope. Just that we give norm reference test, which all the Catholic schools in the state of Texas give the NWA MAP growth test. That's all I can speak to is Catholic schools.
These are good questions. Anybody else? Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and should we wrap it up? Unless
I think the last thing I just want to say is that, for families, when they apply, as I understand it, Jessica, I won't forget your question. I see it right there. They'll get to pick which schools they're looking to apply for their children, because again, they're going to be applying in February. As a private school, we don't really know who we're accepting, right? Because it's a process until sometimes March or April. And also at that point, it's also ongoing. So you may not know as a family which school your child is getting into, but you'll be able to pick what schools you'd like for your child to be considered at, you still have to go through the application process at each individual school. So just know that applying through the CEAO Odyssey to receive TEFA funds has nothing to do with applying to the individual schools. You'll need to contact them. Are you receiving TEFA funds? What is your application process? And really just adhere to that. So if you're a family that's on right now, think about which schools you're interested in your child attending, reach out to them, find out if they're going to accept TEFA dollars, and go from there. I can tell you that most of the Catholic schools will be in the city of Austin, and I know in the state they're really pushing for that. So if there's anybody who's not just in Austin proper or Austin Central Texas. But if for whatever reason the school that you picked is not one that accepts your child, you can still go in and change where you want that money to go to. Will our monetary allotment automatically pay the private? No. So you will have to designate. So just like our HSA, so think of it as Amazon. Again, let's just take St. Austin's, our tuition's $10,000. You'd have to say, I want, and it actually gets sent to the private schools in 4 allotments. I'm assuming it's going to be the same thing as for therapists, since it gets sent to us in quarterly allotments. It would get sent in quarterly allotments to therapists as well. So we'll get our first payment would be July 1, October, January, and then that last one would be, I believe, in March. And the parent will designate how much money goes because it is parental choice. The parent doesn't have to use it to pay all the tuition that year. Maybe they want to bank it for whatever reason. We have to kind of watch this unfold as to how the parents utilize that. But in private schools, a lot of the schools will need that additional funding in order to be able to accept the students so that they can provide the resources that these kids need that would be equivalent to that, what they would be receiving either privately that maybe you're already paying for, or in the public school system.
That's a good question.
Yeah. All right. I don't see any other questions. Oh, there it is.
One more,
There it
Courtney.
is. What if a parent applies and receives the funds and they decide to return to public school? Right. So no, once you return to public school, you are forfeiting that money. And at the last iteration of the law, what I understood is that you would not then be able to apply to go back into a private school at any time of your child's educational career. However, if you are at a private school and you're getting TEFA funds and you decide that private school is not working, but you found another private school that works, you can transfer those dollars to another private school. But you can't go back to public school and ever access that money again. So that's super important to think about as you enroll and really start utilizing these funds.
If they go back, if they're accepted, they're in the private school using the funds, but then go back to the public school next year down the road, could they reapply? That's what I thought I heard. Okay, it's one. Okay, gotcha.
You can go
Just
from
wanted to make
private
sure I
to
heard that.
private. Yeah, you can go to
But not
private to private, but you can't go back and forth.
back and forth. Okay, that's what I thought I heard. I just wanted to make sure I heard it correctly.
Do these combine with parent-directed special education grant funds? Tell me more, Amanda. What would that be?
There's a $1,500 grant.
Yeah. No, not that one.
Okay.
Can you go between private and homeschool? That's a great question. I'm just purely guessing at this point based on logic and what I know of this bill, I would say yes, especially since obviously you're going from, let's just say 10,500 to 2,000. So I would see that as the same as private to private. But again, if you go to homeschool, you're only going to get a max of $2,000 a year, which parents and therapists online both know that that's not going to pay for much.
The others, those were good. All right. So any last thoughts, Tara? Any words of wisdom besides watch those dates, sign up for the email notifications. And again, I will send those out to everybody, not to this evening. I'll send everything out tomorrow. But
yeah, just remember this is a grant funding, and again, Tuesday is coming really quickly. I don't know. Again, I haven't received my directions of what I'm supposed to do as a private school vendor to apply. So I'm thinking it might be somewhat delayed. Just be aware of that. But also, I just want to make sure that families know applying for the grant you still have to apply to those schools. So really be reaching out, touring those schools, seeing what services they have. The last thing I want, because my heart and soul is in as a CALT and a QI, is I want those students to be at schools that will serve those students' needs. And as a consultant for the diocese on behalf of TEFA for the special needs population, what we are saying is we're telling our schools, do not take on students that you can't serve, but get your campuses ready to serve these kids. So we're at this both and kind of position. So do your due diligence in finding schools that can and will be able to serve your child's needs. There's not an official list, but I can tell you, obviously St. Austin's, but we can't take them all. So please, Santa Cruz does a lot. St. Louis does a lot. Some of the other schools, so St. Teresa's and St. Mike's, they'll allow private therapists to come in and be able to accept those kids depending upon their level of need, and where they're at in their remediation, and which then equates to what their level of need is. So it really is just very dependent upon each and every student. And what I'm out there talking with all of our Catholic schools is that not every child with dyslexia looks the same. And so just because you have 5 kids with dyslexia in 4th grade doesn't mean you can't take a 6, because maybe that 6 is a high flyer and they really don't need much, but maybe, testing accommodation. So it really just kind of depends on what that individual child's needs are. And that's what we're really trying to get the schools to be very thoughtful in these applications. What I would recommend as a principal, and again, as a CALT and a QI, is, be very forthcoming with these schools. Don't try to hide anything. It's not going to behoove your child, which is who's most important in the situation. Be very forthcoming and be vulnerable, and have those conversations and walk with the school in discerning if this is the right school for your child. I know our public schools, my kids are a product of public schools, so are Kelly's. We're not here saying that public schools are not, good for students. It's just they're not always good for everybody. And that's what this is about. It's about parents having the choice to provide for their child, just like every parent who has the financial means is able to. So just really discern that, reach out to those schools, tour them, talk with them, share your information about your child, and just, be very vulnerable in the process. And if you have any questions, please reach out and reach out to DCA, Kelly, reach out to myself at St. Austin's. On behalf of, the diocese schools, I can direct you maybe to a school that's closer to your home address. That would be a good fit for you.
And Kimberly, feel free to email me, shoot me an email, and I've written a note to myself as well. We can touch base offline, and I've got lists, and we can have a conversation about schools and what everybody's doing, because I try to keep abreast of that side as well. So, all right. Well, we are almost at the end. I wasn't sure we'd make it to an hour. So lots of good questions. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again, Tara, for joining us and sharing your wisdom. This is important as we navigate. This is all new and unfolding, and we'll see where it all takes us. And we are learning together. So
that's right.
Go enjoy your evening and stay warm. And please feel free to reach out to me, Kelly, at dyslexiacenterofaustin.org. Anytime with questions, we are here as a resource for both those parents as well as our team of CALTs, who are many on the web, who joined us today. So thank you guys. Okay. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.